What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. It is 2025. We've been doing this now for well over 20 years, and it is always fun to take a retrospective look back and see what lessons we've learned along the way. I've made a short list. Let's hop right into it. The first lesson is the use of manifolds, specifically off of the return pump. It seemed like a great idea at the time because you are minimizing the number of devices in your system. We've seen this in people's home aquariums, and we set up our very first system in our new building in this way. We have an Abyss A400 return pump, plenty of power, and we decided to also branch off of it. I think something like a 6 output manifold with different sizes of gate valves and whatever. In retrospect, these equipment manifolds aren't a very good idea. Sure, you are saving, let's say, 6 smaller pumps. The problem is, though, any time that you tweak those gate valves, whether you shut one off or you adjust the flow rate through one, it affects the flow rate through everything. It affects the flow rate in your aquariums. It affects the next couple of devices over. So for example, let's say you're feeding a few of your reactors, turning one down or shutting it off for maintenance, it goofs up everything. Also, it is way better to have individual control over individual devices. Like I said, it made sense at the time. You're trying to conserve some costs on the front end. Not that gate valves are cheap, by the way, so maybe you're not, but you will conserve in some organization. You'll have less of a snake pit to manage with cords and stuff. But going forward here, we have individual pumps driving individual devices rather than using a manifold. Next lesson, the sizing of sumps. Sump space is so incredibly important, and I think that we've kind of underestimated just how much space is necessary. In the new building, it's not quite so bad because we have 8-foot by 4-foot sumps and an additional 2-foot equipment table. That's plenty. In the greenhouse, though, we were really congested. Now that we are redesigning those systems, I think about 40% of the square footage assigned to those systems are for the sumps and equipment management. When in doubt, you guys, bigger sumps. It'll give you a lot more ease of working in them. It'll give you that much more water reservoir for stability, a lot more flexibility in terms of organization. And yeah, just being able to do maintenance and access everything, it's a huge, huge luxury. Moving on, deeper aquariums. This is going to depend on your personal preferences, obviously. My personal preference here is about 18 to 20 inches is the perfect height. Less than that, because we have several tanks that are 12 inches in that ballpark, I can tell a difference in how the fish behave specifically. The fish are kind of freaked out when they're in tanks that shallow. Once you get into that 18 to 20 inch range, they act a lot more settled, a lot more calm. Once you get up into the 24-inch range, it becomes more of a maintenance hassle, so we try to avoid that height. Another perk of those deeper aquariums is that you have a lot more versatility in the types of flow you're able to provide. When tanks get really shallow, I don't love our power head options. Closed loops, if you're going to go that route, no big deal. You can run closed loops on just about any height, but specifically if you're looking to do something with a power head, there are some serious drawbacks to low profile frag tanks because a lot of different pumps are going to suck in air. Our favorite pumps are extremely high powered and we kind of have to bring them lower and lower. And because they're so strong, you start slamming corals with direct flow. And that's kind of not what we're looking for. It's nice to be able to have strong flow shooting up over top of the corals. So you get all the benefits of flow, but you're not like violently striking the corals with flow and you're not sucking in air. And again, that is where deeper aquariums helps. Next lesson that we learned, it has to do with automation. I've joked that we are one of the worst facilities when it comes to automation, but I think that really applied more to automatic testing and control because we don't want a lot of automated control. It comes down to trust more than anything else. And on the testing side, a lot of hobbyist grade testing systems, they do require quite a bit of maintenance. And when you have as many systems as we do, we don't have the attention to dote on that many auto testers. At some point, we're not going to be able to keep up with it and are not going to be able to trust the results that we're getting. It sounded for a long time we were going to swear off all kinds of automation, but that's not necessarily the truth. There are certain types of automation that we love here, and they happen to be the dirt cheapest and simplest. The first one are these Eheim auto feeders. Super simple, super basic, battery operated, and they're pretty darn cheap for how good they are. The next little bit of automation. I'm incredibly late to this party, but I love auto top-offs now. We don't use auto top-offs for big systems where we're shipping a lot of stuff out of there. However, for smaller systems, like our quarantine, or like our Aptasia farm sitting in the corner, stuff that's kind of likely to get neglected a little bit, auto top-offs are beautiful for that. Because the worst thing is, it's an Aptasia farm sitting in the corner. What could go wrong? Nobody pays attention to it. It's going to be sucking in air and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Auto top-off fixes all of that, and just mentally, it frees up all that headspace. And the third thing when it comes to automation isn't so much automation, but it's kind of in the same vein, and that's peristaltic pumps. We have found these things to be incredibly helpful for dosing Kalkwasser, for dosing trace elements, and obviously things like two-part and whatnot. It's so easy for, at least for calc, let's say. We fill up our calc reservoirs once a week, set the thing to run slowly, and in a week, it's all dispensed. Don't have to think about it. Same thing for trace. We do ICPs every month. We make a single concoction for that specific tank, bespoke, and have it just dose slowly over the course of 30 days. Next ICP results come, tweak this and that for that system. Peristaltic keeps running. Super happy with how peristaltic pumps have operated here. Next lesson has to do with lighting. When it comes to lighting, especially LEDs that tend to be super directional, we've always wanted to avoid the shadowing effect that kind of comes with that. What we've decided to do was to use more fixtures. You cover more angles and everything that way. A hidden side benefit to that is that you can run the lights at lower power. I think because we are running more lights at lower power, there is an energy savings there. You're at a much more favorable spot on that curve for energy efficiency. I don't believe it's a linear function. I think you're using significantly less power than at 100%. Also, major side benefit, your fixtures will last way longer. You're not overtaxing the cooling systems. LEDs don't love getting that hot. And when you're cranking these things up to 100%, getting them cooking hot, turns out their lifespan is less. The longevity of the lighting fixtures here has a lot to do with how hard we're running the lights. And because we're running more fixtures, we've never really needed to go past like 40 to 60% on the high end. Next lesson, and it ties into that same general philosophy of lower power. It is to use a larger pump than you might think is necessary and running it at a lower power. You get the benefit of having the extra top-end muscle if you need it, but if you were able to back that thing off to like 50%, you're not saving 50% power. You're saving like 75% power. Across a whole facility, those energy savings add up pretty substantially. Also, if you are of the mindset of wanting to have a hot spare, meaning you have two return pumps that are running on your tank, both of those pumps now can be operated at 50%. And you're getting the benefit of both redundancy and energy savings without paying the upcharge for a monster pump. We didn't do that here because our systems involve a lot of plumbing that stretches hundreds and hundreds of feet per system. So unfortunately, we are reliant on a single large pump. But if I was to do a home aquarium, I think I would go for the dual return because that added bit of redundancy is super nice. Next lesson. This is one that we just learned about a year ago, and that is corals in many ways act like filtration. And when you're starting up an aquarium, you can kind of start it up by dumping in a ton of corals. We had this one 3,000 gallon set, and we did it the old fashioned way of just throwing some food in there, letting it rot. We let that go for about 6 to 12 months or something like that, a very long time. And it was disgusting. It had all kinds of like problematic algae and whatnot. One day I said, "What the heck with this? We have all this overgrowth of a certain type of coral, let's just toss it into there. We need to free up the space anyway." Almost instantaneously, that entire system got clear. We just wasted 6 to 12 months waiting for this system to do its thing when we could have just hit the ground running by throwing corals in. Next up, this again has to do with coral farming specifically. There are some great things to having a large system of aquariums going to a centralized sump and doing all your life support in that sump. Your protein skimming, your UV, your reactors, all the things, right? However, lately, I'm discovering the benefits to having individually filtered smaller tanks. Certain corals just don't do well when they are in a system with other things. I can't really explain why, because it's not like we're trying to do different things in these different tanks necessarily. I think it might be the interaction with other corals. Who knows? But case in point, Micromusa lordhowensis has been one of those corals that just hated every large system we put them in. And it was only until we took all of our struggling colonies of Micromusa, threw them into a quarantine. And granted, we did the whole dipping and stuff, but we were doing that in the bigger aquariums anyway. Put them all into this smaller tank, about 60 gallons. They were so unhappy, we practically considered them forsaken. But we'll give it a try in this smaller aquarium. They all recovered and have never looked better. Again, it just might be that interaction with other corals, that allelopathy or whatever. We are starting to see these benefits to having smaller monoculture rather than having these enormous systems that are all interconnected. This is going to sound really random, but follow me here. Hydrogen peroxide has been really nice. It's like a heavy duty oxidizer that, as long as you don't get a ton of it into your systems, can do a lot of work for you in terms of both acting kind of as a detergent and sterilization. Where that came in very helpful to us most recently was when we were doing a water change with our saltwater delivery system. We have this saltwater delivery system. It's about 1,000 gallons. It is under pressure, so it sends water to every sump on demand. Very cool system. But one time we used it and we got this hydrogen sulfide smell. Turns out, over the course of 5 years or so, some bacteria is going to form in these lines. It's sending water to 2 different buildings. It's a long distance. Anyway, the easiest way to deal with this is to put a shock dosage of hydrogen peroxide into this saltwater mixing station. It's not even that much. It's like 6 liters of hydrogen peroxide per 1,000 gallons to try to get it to about 50 parts per million of hydrogen peroxide. And then you just run that through your lines. If a little trickle of that gets into your tank, it's not a big deal because that quantity in, let's say, 1,000 to 3,000 gallons is orders of magnitude lower than a therapeutic dose. It's doing nothing. But while that stuff at 50 parts per million is sitting in your lines or just even sitting in that tub, it is doing hardcore oxidation. You would think that we've been pressure washing the inside of our saltwater mixing station because it is getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. Big fan of hydrogen peroxide. Last little lesson that we've learned. When people are designing their facilities, they are doing it with size in mind. Like, I don't know, we all became size queens when it came to coral farming. I don't know. But we've learned that efficiency in design is way better than just sheer volume and scale. Right now, we're redoing some tanks in the greenhouse. It was like a 20-year-old layout, and we know how to set things up better for maintenance and just quality of life for us. But in doing so, we are shedding easily half the volume that's in the greenhouse. Even though we're losing that space, we're not losing any of the productivity. A lot of that space and volume was simply just wasted. That's one of those lessons that unfortunately you might not be able to learn until you've overbuilt a system in terms of size, and you've made a lot of sacrifices just to get that volume. But the sacrifices you made came at the expense of just workability and ergonomics. And that's a trade that we will never take again. I fully appreciate now less volume, fewer devices, easier maintenance. All right, guys, that does it from here. Hopefully some of the lessons that I've learned might apply to your systems. Till next time, happy reefing.